Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Emerging Pod, where we get emerging people into emerging careers. Today's guest is Anna Koroleva, who is now a conversational AI engineer at Springbok. Anna has a linguistic background, having worked for a bit as a forensic linguist before moving into more analytical roles and starting to work with NLP algorithms. She has a joint PhD in computer science with the University of Amsterdam and Paris-Saclay, and she regularly volunteers in AI for Good projects. Anna, great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me, and thanks for a great introduction. That was very comprehensive, very nice.
That's a good use of that French accent stuff.
Thank you.
Yes, I did think that. I don't think I can pronounce it that nicely.
So, Anna, thanks for being with us. Let's jump straight into the beginning. So, you studied linguistics at university. What made you choose that field? And did you have any specific expectations in terms of what kind of careers this would open up?
That's funny question because when I was studying at school, I was always good at maths, but I never particularly liked it because it just happened that some of my maths teachers were not that nice and particularly not that nice to some of my friends. And that when you're a kid, you don't really filter out, you don't divide teachers from the domain. So I always loved languages, literature, so kind of the, humanities subjects, and we had great teachers in those. So when I was choosing what to study at university, and I knew that okay, I don't want to completely go into humanities because I do love maths and I'm fairly good with it, but also I didn't want to go completely into maths because I didn't love it that much. And then I came across linguistics, and that's basically a part of the philological faculty or the faculty of letters in some other terms. So it's kind of humanities in a way, but it does have maths, it does have programming, and you can go into fields such as NLP, natural language processing, after that. So you get choices, and you can choose to be a translator if you want, or you can go into programming. So it gives you a good background to then choose a quite varied career path, or at least it seems like that when you enter in. Because then when I was studying, we actually had much more theoretical linguistics than computational approaches. So that wasn't, we did have it, but there were not that many open source tools to learn at the time. So it was taught as well as it could be back then, but it wasn't as good as it is now, as I know. And yeah, I didn't really know what I would do even when I was graduating. It was a big open question. Where do I go next? And I think it's the case for many other people as well.
Big time. Yeah, a lot of people relate to that. I relate to that as well. So then what was that first job like for you, and how did you choose it? How did you transition?
So as Sofian said, it was in forensic linguistics, and I think I was just looking for jobs with the word linguist in title. And I did think about trying translation, but it's not really easy to get into it, or if I was interested. So I didn't really land the chance to get in there. I did look at different, careers connected to publishing, such as editor or stuff like that, but I didn't really feel that interested. And then there was that forensic linguistics job, and it kind of sounds interesting. Like it's like you live in a detective, and I love detectives. So I went for it, and it turned out it wasn't really a good place. It was, as we call it now, it was a toxic workplace. Back then, I didn't really even know that type of words, but it was just bad. It was I don't like to say bad things about my past employers, but it's really true that they did a lot of things that were wrong, unethical. They didn't treat employees well. So I survived for 8 months. Most my colleagues survived 2 weeks to 2 months. So I was one of the longest there, but I was desperate to get out. And I was looking for jobs, and I was looking, I think, for half a year, and there was not really many things that would be suitable for me. Again, I couldn't get into translation, and I didn't really want to go into editing or copywriting. And then there was that one job as analytical linguist at a text mining company, and I applied. I had no idea what I would be doing. I had no idea what it would be like, because even when we graduated, we knew that, computational linguistics, NLP exists, but we had no idea what it is like to work in it. But I applied, and I really loved the people. I loved the company. It was a very nice, friendly interview and everything. And I was like, yeah, I really want this. I don't know what I'll be doing, but I want this. And I managed to get it. I was really lucky to be, to be there at the right place in the right time. And I got in, and I really fell in love with NLP and everything related to that after that. So it was almost random, because I needed some job. I didn't want to leave that bad workplace for nothing, because, we all have hobbies to maintain or whatever, and you don't always just want to go into the work market without a job to sustain you. So that was almost a random choice at the time, and it just happened to be the right one.
Yeah, definitely the best time to look for a job is when you have one. It just makes the process a lot
Exactly,
easier.
because you're a little bit less desperate, right?
Exactly, yeah. So you then jumped into analytical linguistics. So like you mentioned, linguistic is sort of maybe perceived as being a non-technical field, although it's changing. When was the first time you applied data science or data science concept to a linguistic problem?
So I think I did touch on it in that first analytical linguist role, but it wasn't a fully fledged data science role, because we worked with NLP, but more rule-based. So, for example, extracting entities such as locations or people's names, you can try to, define some rules, like location can go with specific prepositions, or it has to be capitalized, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to do there for a linguist. It's a lot of fun, but it's not really the kind of best up-to-date approach. And we did have some machine learning models as well, but as linguists, we worked more on preparing data for that. For example, there could be data sets that would be annotated with some problems or contradictions, and we would need to go and find ways to fix it. Again, not by hand. We would try to, again, write a script or write some regular expressions to fix that, and then we would give it to programmers and they would train models. So I was kind of side by side with more, machine learning type of work, but I wasn't training models by myself. I wasn't writing those scripts. And at some point, even new linguists that we were hiring, they knew much more about machine learning than I did. And I realized, all right, this is actually the kind of mainstream approach that's bringing better results than our rules. And I needed to go and learn about that. And that was the time when I understood that, okay, I need to go and study some more. I need to go do a PhD. And I did. And that's when I moved to France. Yeah, I studied some machine learning there. And to be honest, I keep learning always, because it's such a big domain, data science and all around it. You never know enough.
It is, and it's continuously evolving, and very quickly these days, especially. It's a good segue into the PhD. I was going to ask, what you mentioned, why did you actually start the PhD? But what was the PhD about? What did you study during?
So it was in the domain of NLP for medical domain, for analyzing clinical articles, reporting clinical trials. So it's actually quite interesting. I really love the topic I was working on, so I'm going to talk a bit more about it.
Please.
So there is a problem that's called spin, and that's basically when you come up with a new treatment, new intervention. You have to run a clinical trial when you compare that intervention to something that already exists, or to a placebo if there is no known treatment for whatever you're studying. And there are some statistical tests that you run, and you can prove that your new treatment is good, or maybe you don't prove that. That's sad, but it happens. And so then you write it up and you submit an article reporting your trial. And sometimes people write these articles in a bit of a biased way, because obviously you always believe that what you invented is great. So it can be subconscious, but people try to write it more positively than maybe they should. Maybe they focus on some kind of secondary findings that showed something good, but not the main finding, not the main reason why it was even needed. Or they just misinterpret statistical tests. That also happens, because again, clinical trials people are not always statisticians. They have statisticians on the team, but it still means that you can misinterpret something, and that can have bad impact, because if my intervention is not good, that means that people should not be using it. But if I write it in a way that people perceive it to be good, I mean, the doctors will start using it, patients will get hopes that, all right, this terrible disease can be cured now, and that might not be the case. So that's really harmful. And my job was about trying to come up with NLP algorithms to basically to say that, all right, here is spin, and it's here, here, and here. And there's lots of types, lots of variants of it. So we only focused on a few, obviously, and yeah, I think we did something quite interesting. So unfortunately, it's only in my GitHub. It's not implemented anywhere yet. I hope someday in my life I will get to push it a bit forward and make it actually used somewhere.
Never
It's
too late.
interesting. It's interesting. Like, the first place I would want to try it is on certain adverts, just to see what the outcome would be.
It's quite specific for clinical trials domain, so it might not come up with anything. But I think it's relevant for that as well, because obviously adverts is the quintessence of biases, because you say, all right, we are the best here. And even I remember some old advertisings. I don't know if they still do it, but they used to have some, for example, if it would be some, house cleaning stuff, they would have some generic product, just a standard white, bottle, and saying, all right, our product is better than this, and we proved it by those and those trials. And think, yeah, all right, the generic product doesn't even exist. It's not a thing. What did you compare it to? So it's all there, it's not just clinical trials. It's the same in many other domains. We just don't really see it because we don't think about it. And to be honest, even in NLP, when we write our articles, we always want to say, right, my model is really the best. And unfortunately, we do bring biases into that as well. So it's not just biomedical domain, it's everywhere.
Especially political advertising. That'd be an interesting one to look at.
Actually, the term spin comes from politics. There is a notion spin doctor. And that's someone that, as a high-profile politician, you can hire someone who would try to either enhance your profile or maybe compromise your rivals' profiles by manipulating public opinion. So, like, if you write something bad about someone in a specific way, without necessarily directly lying, but just throwing some hints around, you might actually impact the opinion of people quite a lot. And I'm not big on politics, but I can imagine that actually is quite a big instrument for manipulating people's thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the state of the NLP field at the time? What were the main challenges back then?
So when I was first getting onto NLP, it was actually fairly small, particularly compared to now. So let's say, like looking for NLP jobs, there could be maybe one job in half a year to a year. So it would really be hard, if you are in the domain, it's hard to change jobs. And if you want to get into the domain, you really need to be lucky to catch that one job when it pops up. So since then, it really changed. So even back home, for example, now every major bank or mobile provider has its own AI or data science team, and they hire linguists and data scientists and machine learning engineers, and they work on chatbots or just analyzing whatever data they have at hand to improve their solutions. So it's really growing. And I think it's one of the reasons I went to France is because NLP and data science domain in Russia was kind of behind what it is in Europe and in the States, but I'm not in the States, so let's talk about Europe. So it's more kind of on the front end here in France, in the UK, where I am now. And I really wanted to kind of get out here, see what it's like here. And now it's actually catching up back home as well. And I know that many other countries are also trying to move forward with the domain, because obviously it's everywhere now. You hear about it everywhere. Even, ChatGPT made people very much familiar with NLP, with conversational AI, because, okay, it's there and you can actually do something with it. It's good enough now to be practically useful. And so, yeah, I think it's really gone a very long way since I started. And I just remember that feeling when, you look for a job of your profile and there's nothing coming up, and nothing and nothing and nothing for months. And it's not like that now. Now I think there is another problem now. I think there's so many jobs and so many companies, and they define the roles differently. So you can have the data science title, or machine learning engineer, or NLP engineer, or data analyst. And there's some set of skills that's common, some set of tasks that's common. But different companies will define it differently. So they might call a data analyst a data scientist, or the other way around. Then there's data engineering, which can be a separate title, or can also come with one of the other titles that I mentioned. So it can be really hard, and it can be really hard to understand what you want, because maybe you are more of a data analyst type of profile, but you get into data science and you're really unhappy there, or the other way around. And maybe there is just that little change in the domain that you need to make to be happy. But how do you find out if your job title is what you thought it would be, but you're not enjoying it, it's very easy to decide that this field is not for you. But what you need to do is you just need to slightly change the focus, make this little shift. And I think it's quite overwhelming now, because if you look for data science jobs, there's a ton of them, but they're also different. They request different tech stacks, different domain knowledge, and I think it's more of a pain of choosing now. I think also when you're applying for jobs now, you can apply for all data science jobs you find, and you will be rejected from many of them because maybe you're not the right fit, but maybe they're also not the right fit for you, but you don't get to understand that. And that's, I think it's quite hard, and it can be quite depressing because, okay, you're a data scientist, you're applying for jobs, it feels like you're a fit, but you never really know all the details, and there is that right job for you, but how do you find it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think you mentioned, different people, different companies have different definitions for things. And especially when you go down into like smaller companies, startups, people wear multiple hats. So you might say that you're looking for a data scientist, but they actually they have to do a lot of the data labeling, some data engineering to make sure everything flows in correctly. So yeah, that's one of the problems we've spotted as well. There's not a clear, cohesive communication in the industry about what's needed, what are the different job roles, what do they do, and what are the skills that are required. So that's part of the problem that we're trying to address. But then going back to when you finished your PhD, at that point, how did your portfolio look like? What was in your portfolio? Did you have one
To be honest,
first?
it wasn't huge. So basically, it was just my PhD project, which was a terrible, huge mess, to be honest, sitting on my GitHub. And that, I mean, it's a good project. It did good things, but it wasn't modular. It wasn't easy to reuse. Like, it just had a lot of things that were kind of all blended together. And sometimes I even got messages from people saying, all right, I want to use just this one model from it, but how do I do that? And it would be really hard to do that. And I started rewriting it to make it much more simpler to just use any little bit of it that you want. And it's kind of still in the state of being rewritten, but there are some things that can be reused now. But basically, it wasn't huge, and it was really quite difficult. And even then, with a PhD, with everything, I had worked by then in France. I had stages in the Netherlands, in the UK. So you would think, you have a network, you have experience, but it was still hard to even get interviews, not even talking about jobs. So from many applications, I didn't even hear back. From I think that was basically the main outcome when I was trying to apply for jobs. And again, I'm not from the EU, right? So I was under some pressure to get a job, and that can also impact your decisions. It can put you in a rush, and sometimes it might mean that maybe you go down a path that's not your preferred path. So, for example, I would prefer to move back into industry at that point, but I stayed in academia for a while more. Because I just didn't really hear back from anything in the industry.
So
And basically, during my next step, which was a postdoc, then I started kind of building a portfolio properly. My GitHub is still a very erratic thing, but there's a bit more things there now. There's a bit more of even just little snippets of the things I learn. I try to put there because, okay, if you don't do it now, then a couple months later, you forgot what you've done. And
sure.
you even forget to mention it in interviews and things like that. So it's really good to try to keep that up to date. And that's also when I started doing those AI for good projects. And that was a really, I think, quite a changing point, because it can be really hard to start doing something new. Because, all right, you've done a course. Okay, there's thousands of people who've done the same course. So how do you get into a job with that? And that you can do that by doing these volunteering projects. You can get experience, which then help you land a job. And that was a really big thing for me, I think.
That's interesting. So that's Dina, right?
Yeah.
And it's a community where you kind of, if you're maybe a bit more entry level into data science, or maybe a bit more mid as well, you can volunteer to help not-for-profits with any kind of data science projects that they have. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. So basically the original point, I think, was having some kind of alternative to Kaggle, because on Kaggle you compete with other people. You don't work with the company who wants the result of whatever model you're building. So basically, yeah, you're trying to get that little improvement, but you don't collaborate. Or you can have a small team, but then there's hundreds of other teams that are also working on the project. So you don't get together. You don't get to come up with the best result just because, you don't get to talk to other teams. You're trying to be better than them. But if you bring people together and make them work together and not trying to fight each other, you can actually get to maybe not better results, but at least we get to one good solution combining all the knowledge and not a lot of separate solutions fighting between each other. And basically that's what Omdana does. So they partner with different organizations like non-commercial companies, NGOs, maybe startups in the fields of mental health or different environment initiatives. Like there was a project about increasing basically the level of success of planting forest or new trees in Madagascar, I think, and they were using computer vision to track like how many trees survived, how many do we need to plant more. So basically it's everything. It's NLP, computer vision, kind of classic data science with just kind of tabular data, numeric data. So they do all kinds of things, and it's really good because basically how I got there, I did some machine learning courses. I obviously did my PhD, and I knew that, okay, I still don't feel like I know enough. I still don't feel like I have enough hands-on experience. And then I went there and I'm like, I used it in a course, but now I can use it in practice. And then you actually get to, you're fighting with your data set because it's probably messy. You're fighting with your model because it's probably not running for whatever reason, because you missed some little detail from that, maybe just worked with that nice and clean data set you had in your course, but now maybe you have crazy long text and you need to think more about how you how you organize your trimming and padding and things like that. So, and that really helps. And that also shows employers that you have some real world experience where you start from gathering the data, thinking about how do you even approach it, coming up with solution, potentially deploying it. It doesn't always get as far as a full deployment, but at least you can get something about it as well.
Yeah, and
that's
it also
really useful. I love them. I can't recommend them more.
It also shows a lot of initiative and drive and ownership to do something, not just wait around. So I think that's very useful.
Exactly.
From an
And you
employer
also get to talk to the partner company, partner organization, so you can, they say, okay, we want this, and you can say, okay, this you can do via those and those methods, and then you come up with how exactly you implement it. How do you do it in the most useful way? Because sometimes you can put a year on developing something and it will be cool, but maybe you can come up with something as a kind of MVP, minimal viable product, which can be done much faster, and that will bring some initial value. And when you have initial value, then you can invest more time in it. And that's, with these short-term projects, you really get to understand that okay, you don't spend years researching this. You just need to figure out a quick way to do something useful. And that's how it works in the world, right? You don't always get 3 years to do a PhD to come up with a solution. In a company, you need to be fairly quick. Otherwise, we just run out of money and go bankrupt.
It definitely teaches you to be more agile. So,
I know the feeling.
Amongst all the different projects that you've done at Omdana, is there a favorite that stood out?
It's hard to say because my first one was really great. So it was a very kind of early stage project with the organization is called ASET, and it works with infrastructure in Africa. I will not remember the expansion of the abbreviation, but it's African Center for something. But the goal was to try to understand how data science can be used to understand the needs of Africa in terms of infrastructure. And they didn't have any data science before, I think. So it was really very exploratory. We had to figure out what data is out there, how we can use it. So we had NLP and computer vision there. And it was really nice because it was so open-ended, and it started with a complete chaos. We didn't know what to do and where to go, but it ended up developing some really nice things. And I think they did kind of pick up on a few of them and continue developing, full time after that. So that's really nice. So that was good just because it was such a great team and such a great experience of going from completely nothing to something useful. And another one would be my first project with chatbots, because as you said, I'm in conversational AI now, and I was really interested. But again, I did some courses, I had no experience, and I just jumped into a project thinking, all right, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing. I have no idea if I know enough to take part in this, but I'm going to try. And I learned so much about RAS, and basically that's what kind of took me to this job. And that's amazing, because that's exactly the point of Omdana. You get into a fairly niche domain, like chatbots, they're big now, but it's still a fairly little subfield of AI. And then you get experience and you understand the problems. You can talk about it in job interviews, and people see that, all right, maybe you don't have tons of experience, but you understand the point. You understand what it's all about. So I think that's quite a classic example of how Omdana helps people.
You mentioned something interesting, which is the not knowing whether or not you have the right skills and experience yet to apply those in a project. So do you have a process? How do you manage that balance between learning, doing courses, and then applying that in a project? Because what some people do is they kind of get stuck in just doing more courses and more courses and more courses, but at some point you just need to
Yeah,
stop
I
and
was at
apply
that
them.
place. Exactly. Exactly. So I was in that place, and yeah, you start learning, let's say, machine learning, and you start with Coursera, then you find some more courses and longer courses, whatever. And at some point they even start to kind of repeat each other because, all right, there's only as much as you can teach without, actual practical experience. And yeah, I just felt that, yeah, I can do more courses, but then I forget what I learned in the previous ones. Potentially they're repeating each other, so I'm not getting anything new. And I felt quite lost. And then it was fairly early days of Omdana, and I just saw some random repost or comment from someone in my network about one of the previous projects. And I'm like, this looks interesting, and I went to look at it. And I found that first project with the infrastructure in Africa. Like, okay, I can see some potential of NLP here. I'm going to apply, and whatever happens. And then basically I got in it, and basically once you got in it first time, it's much easier to kind of keep going because first time was good, and you're in the community, and you know that it's fun, so you just you can apply for projects and you can manage it better. And since then I try to do projects more frequently because, again, you can do courses on MLOps or I don't know, dashboards, whatever you want, but until you get to actually do it in practice, you won't really kind of it won't stay in your mind that well. And I really try to kind of get back to Omdana fairly regularly. It can be difficult because it's quite a big time investment, and just every time you get on a project, something happens, like some trouble in your personal life, something in your family, and then you're quite exhausted at the end because you have to manage it all. But I'm planning to hopefully do something in the next month, because I think now it's been a while since I've done the last one, so I think it's time now, yeah, to get back into it. And you can also choose projects on different domains, so you can go into computer vision. It's really a big one. There's projects with videos. Like one quite interesting one was about analyzing videos of I think people who like babysitters and people who care about children to identify potential abuse. And that's really cool because like I have no experience with working with videos and no experience with computer vision. So if I wanted to, I would go there and learn something. Because again, in courses, you learn only as much as they give you, and they can't give you a lot just because, all right, there's an infinite amount of things you can do. So no course can cover all of that, no matter how good it is.
Yeah, and I imagine for you now at the stage of your career, to learn something new, you don't need to learn the basics anymore. It's just about having a problem that you need to solve. So if you want to get into computer vision, it's much more interesting and engaging to work on a project rather than just.
Oh, I still need to learn basics sometimes because as I said before, data science has so many kind of things around it, like software development is there, MLOps is there. If you want, linguistics is also there. You can go into kind of domain, like subdomains, like medical or whatever. So you can always learn something more on whatever side. So like, for example, for me, I have very limited experience with MLOps, and that's something that I'm trying to study now. But again, time is limited and everything. But again, it's something that, yeah, you can do tutorials, but then you get to practice and you kind of get a bit scared because, all right, it's kind of a responsible part because you're deploying something, people will see it, right? So it's much better to try it in Omdana with support of other people who are also learning, who are also making their mistakes. But some of them have that experience and they will explain it to you. And, it helps a lot. It really does.
True. And so looking back a bit, you've gone from a non-technical background to moving more into now what's called data science. You've also mentored someone from a biology background to NLP background.
Yeah, so that was a girl student in Switzerland where I did my postdoc, and yeah, she was in biology previous to that, and she wanted to do NLP, and so she was really motivated, really interested. So to be honest, I didn't really need to do much because she was just she's a perfect person to mentor because if someone is kind of wanting but kind of lazy, it can be hard because whatever you tell them, if they don't do anything, you can't help. But she was just doing so many things on her own already. So I think from my side, I just helped her see a more practical side of it a little bit.
Okay.
Because again, she did courses and everything, but it can be hard to make the step from courses to kind of practice.
Makes sense. Well, what would you say are the main things for someone that's going from a non-computer science domain to get into data science? What would be the main thing that they should focus on?
So I think, I guess from my personal experience, I think it's really good once you've done some, initial courses. It's good to get into something like, again, Kaggle or Omdena or all the kinds of hackathons that are there, because you build some practical skills, you meet people, you network, and that's also important. Because when you meet more people, you talk to them, you understand the domain more, you figure out what you want to do, you learn from them, and you also just get more kind of exposure. Maybe you participate in events, maybe like I'm talking here now, right? So you get maybe you get invited to talk to someone, or you even go to those talks, and again you connect to people, and that like is probably commonplace, but having a good public profile really makes you much more visible to recruiters. And yeah, maybe it's a bit stupid, it's not even a hard skill, but it works. So the world is like that. So I think that's a really good one. So just try to go into the practical world and meet people and not be shy. There's a lot of platforms now that also offer not just courses, but they help you build a portfolio. So I think that's also a good one, because again, you usually learn along with other people. So again, you're building your network, you're learning from them. Taking part in open source projects is good, but I know some people who do that. I also know a lot of people who would be shy to do it. So it's a good one, but it can be a bit scary, of course. So I think it's important not to be scared, because no one's been born perfect. No one's been born a data scientist. Everybody's done 1,000 mistakes on the way. And as long as you're open to learn, and well, as long as you are working with people who are not completely grumpy, you will be fine. They will help you. There are grumpy people as well. There are people that will make you feel like you're an imposter. I had that in my life. I had that in job interviews as well. And it just happens. Just let it go. Don't let that make you feel like you don't belong there. It's fine. There's people with so many backgrounds. And again, if you come from, I don't know, if you come from medical background, for example, it's very natural to get into medical data science, like by NLP or whatever. There's a lot of applications for computer vision. And if you want from there, you can then move to general data science if you want. So there's always paths that you can take. It's not always obvious how to find them. But again, try to talk to people as well, because I always try to answer people who ask questions about anything, because like I'm not a guru of data science, but I've made a few steps on the way, so I can try to help. And some people won't answer, and that's normal, because again, you never know what's happening in their lives. But it's really good talking to people. It really helps, I think, most of the time. So just don't be shy, basically, and don't be scared. That's really important, because I know how hard it can be, and you feel like you are just complete imposter. You don't belong here. You're not technical enough, but it's just not true.
That's sound advice. So having been through the recruitment process a few times yourself, you mentioned in one of the previous podcasts that I looked at that you had a story where at some point you just kind of froze during an interview, where you knew what to say, but you
Yeah,
just
that was.
couldn't come out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So it was quite a funny story, because I was contacted by a recruiter, and they sent me a job description that was way more technical than my profile. And it was also not in the location where I wanted. So I knew that it wouldn't be a fit, but I agreed to talk to them, because why not? And I kind of thought that we would have just a chat with the recruiter, and we would figure out that it's not my profile. Maybe there is another job that I could be a better match for. But that didn't happen. They just threw me straight into a very technical interview. And I was doing some courses prior to that, and I thought I did one of the kind of biggest, most prominent Coursera machine learning courses, and it was quite fresh in my mind and everything. But in that interview, it was too technical. I didn't really expect it to just go straight into technical side, and I just freaked out. And I think the people I was talking to, they didn't really know that I was kind of invited there, that I didn't apply. So I think they felt like I'm just like, what is she even doing there? She knows nothing. So it was just complete miscommunication from the beginning. And I sensed that, and they sensed that. And I just freaked out completely. And yeah, I think they asked me something like, what is a neural network? And I had that picture, in every course you do about neural networks, there will be a picture with some nodes, some connections. And I just couldn't find words to explain that because you usually just get the picture in those courses. And I'm like, I can't answer this question. And it's not that I don't know the answer, I just don't have the words for it. It was a complete shame. It was a complete failure. So now I can laugh at it. Now, it's been a couple of years, but then obviously it was quite painful. And I'm afraid to think about what they think of me because it was really terrible. And they had their own agenda, let's say. So they were not trying to understand who I was. They were just following, their questions. And obviously that wasn't a fit for me. So that's probably also a hint for recruiters. Sometimes people come in, from neighboring domains, from non-technical domains, actually have skills that you want, but maybe you just need to be a bit more open, let people explain who they are, what they bring, because if you follow your agenda, you will miss out everything that they have to say. But again, I wasn't a recruiter there, right? So I just had to accept that it was a failure.
Well, now
again, that would be to everyone because it's normal to get frozen. So one thing that you can read on the internet sometimes is that you should go for as many interviews as you can, and if you get invited to interviews, just go because it's practice and it's also a skill. And I noticed that with myself, the more interviews I do, the better I do them. And even, questions about what is a neural network. First time I didn't have the words, but when you do it a few times, you will have the words, even for these basic concepts. And that's important.
Yeah.
Sounds stupid. But
No, I think it makes
it's just how it is.
it makes perfect sense. I had a similar experience where it was not in data science, but I applied for a role of software developer role, and it was for a company building CAD tools. And initially, when we got there for the interview, they gave us a tour, and during the tour, the lady that was giving us the tour casually just mentioned, "Oh, it's interesting. Everyone here has a math background. I never thought about it. That's curious." Didn't really think much of it, and then we sit for the interview, and the interviewer asked, he asked me, "How do you determine whether a point is within a circle?" And I have an engineering background, so my first thought is like, "Oh, computer vision, like this is how you would approach it." It's like, no, using math. And I knew the answer, but because I hadn't used that type of math in such a long time, it took me a while to just remember. And a similar thing, we went through the interview, and there were very much like a lot of math questions. And in the end, I knew I wasn't fit for the job. I was glad that I did this interview because I was like, oh, that refreshed some math that I haven't used in a while. I definitely don't want to work here because that's definitely not what I want to do. But it's still a really useful experience. But yeah, on the moment you feel like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
Yeah, that's also a bit of a thing, like what you say. You were thinking about it in terms of computer vision, and when you come to a job interview with some things that you've just learned or some things that you really like, you frame everything in that context. But sometimes you just need to kind of step back and just think naturally, because sometimes it's a simpler answer or an answer from maths course that's maybe even from your school, from your university. So it's not anything recent. It's not anything like it's not anything that we would even expect there, and that can be really hard. Like, ask me a maths question now, I'll probably fail even if I know it, just because I haven't written it down in a while. I haven't practiced it in a while, so I won't be able to say it. And that's really funny. So it's a lot about how information gets actualized in the brain, and if something is not kind of on top of your mind, you will just not be able to articulate it. And it doesn't matter how well you know it, you will just forget the words. And even worse if you're talking a non-native language.
That's true.
Yeah, recency bias is a very powerful thing. The things that you've recently came across are going to be top of your mind. One thing we think about quite often is reflecting on your own kind of growth and skills and being able to quantify that to some extent so that you can communicate that further. Do you have any kind of process for doing that, for managing that? How do you reflect? How do you keep track of the skills that you develop, especially in such a quickly evolving field?
So I think for me, there's maybe two ways. I'm sure there's more, but I guess one kind of common way of having a track of what you're doing is a GitHub portfolio, GitHub repos, because all right, you've done a course on TensorFlow, PyTorch, or you've gone through tutorials for whatever NLP tools out there like Hugging Face, and yeah, you know that you've done it, but it's just maybe in your local computer. So just put it up there, because then you actually know that, okay, here is a place where I've done this, and if I need to use it again, I can go there instead of digging out that course or tutorial. And it also kind of leaves track that, okay, here is my repo with TensorFlow, here's my repo with Hugging Face. So you actually have some tangible proof that you've done it, and even for yourself that works. Like for me, I also like if I've done a course. Okay, I've done a course, maybe I have a certificate, but it doesn't feel tangible enough. When I have a repo, it actually feels that, all right, I have a trace. And another one that I also like is writing things like blogs or, LinkedIn posts or whatever you prefer. Because that's what I did with that first project with Raza. We learned a lot, and there are a lot of things that are not so obvious from tutorials, so you need to just try a few things. It can be even I think it was a thing that's called slot film. So when you're creating a chatbot, you need to keep track of some things. And there was a tutorial on how you save one, but there was no information about how you save a few. And there could be a few ways of writing that. And obviously I had to try all of them and see which one fails and which one works. And I just wrote it all in a blog, with a couple of other collaborators, because that's how you remember it. And I was almost approaching that blog as something that, 2 months later, I can come back to it and remember how do I set up as a project, how I do that slot filling or whatever else. And, half a year down the line, you will not remember it. You will remember that you've done it, but you will not remember how. So having a blog with maybe snippets of code or links to, again, your GitHub repo or whatever will really help. And I think that's a really good one. And I think it's important not to think about how much it's getting read, because it happens that, you publish something and there's 5 views and you're like, oh my God, it's terrible. But it doesn't matter, because first of all, it all depends also on when you post it and whatever. It's time of the week, time of the day. So it's not nothing about your post sometimes. And it doesn't really matter. As long as you can go back to it and use it to refresh your own memory, that's good.
100%.
Yeah, I know that some people write like short things, like maybe tweets or maybe short blogs or whatever. So all that works, just as long as you keep some trace. I guess it's good if it's something that you can easily navigate. Like LinkedIn is not always easy to navigate. Things that are far back in time can be hard to retrieve.
Mm-hmm.
So if you write in LinkedIn, maybe keep that also somewhere locally so that you can search through it, or also have it on GitHub. Just because, internet is internet. One day LinkedIn goes down, we lose all our posts. So try to have some backup of it.
Yeah, 100%. It's important to remember that when you post on these platforms, whether it's Medium, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, you are at the mercy of the algorithm. So
Exactly.
factors like the time of the day when you post, how much engagement do you get on the first, 10, 15, 30 minutes of it, based on the time of the day that you post. All these different things will affect the reach, engagement, and impressions that you get.
Yeah.
But if you remember that actually the most important thing is you writing down something so that you can put your thoughts in order and better clarify in your own mind what you did, how to talk about it. That's the number one goal. I think that's the most valuable thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the second thing is, okay, sure, you can have a bank of evidence that is published on different platforms. And if you care about becoming famous at some point, when maybe there's some kind of black swan event in your life and there's a lot of attention on you, people are going to see that, oh, you've actually been posting for a while, so you consistently put out useful information. So I think that's quite important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Not to get discouraged.
Some people that I really like in terms of how they're building their career and their portfolio, they even when they do courses, it can be a Coursera course that everyone does, but they don't just post their certificate. They write that, okay, I've done this, I like this, I learned this, and they kind of like it's very hard because, all right, I knew nothing and now I know something. It's not so easy to say, right? It makes you feel
Sure.
like, again, you're a beginner, but being able to reflect on that and put it in words, again, it makes you accounted for yourself, so you know what you've learned. It also makes it more visible, and even if it's a beginner level, that's still a skill that you have started on. So like, take a person who's never seen, I don't know, TensorFlow, and take a person who's done even some beginner courses, who will be preferred for a job? Obviously, the one who has some exposure. So it's very hard not to be shy to do these things sometimes, because again, some people have friendly audience, some people will see some bad reactions or whatever. That also happens, and just ignore it.
That's
Just
very
move
true.
forward.
That's very true. We don't have too much time left, but I did want to tap into the final bit, which is conversational AI, which is obviously a pretty hot topic. What kind of projects are you working on at the moment, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so I've just started a new job, so I'm still getting onto it. But one project that I quite like is with a company in Germany, and they have a lot of salespeople who drive around, and they need to check, where do they go next, or whatever product is available in this region or whatever, and they're driving, so they're in the car. So they can't use their phone with their hands because it's obviously dangerous. So they're building, or they have built, and they're improving their voice assistant. So these people can ask a question like, "Yeah, what's my next destination?" or "Tell me about products in Bavaria," or "Tell me about even." They also have a part about, for example, internal topics such as career development. And basically, they're building a huge bot about that, and I think it's pretty cool. I think it's quite cool how it's combined with voice technology, because it's all the practical things. Like sometimes you say, all right, why do you need a chatbot? You can just Google it, or even search through your internal database if it's internal topics. Why chatbot? And all right, if you can't use your hands, you do need some kind of conversational engine behind it, because even voice search is pretty much kind of getting into a conversation. But if you just even run voice search by terms, that's not natural. It's natural to talk. And I think that's a really cool case of why conversational AI. Why do we not just search a database and return most relevant documents? So I quite like that one.
Yeah.
And in general, I guess a more kind of generic thing that the company is doing, as I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but the projects that I did with chatbots were with Raza, and it's a really good tool, and it's open source. It's very customizable, but it's quite maybe hard to get started with, because there's just a lot of kind of technical concepts, data formats, and this and that, and it can be hard to set it up. So Springbok, where I am now, is building a kind of a visual tool where you can build chatbots without having to dig deep into understanding Raza, or understanding the technical bits of Raza. So you just need to understand your flow of the dialogue, and I think that's really cool as well. So I think that's something that can help people get into building their chatbots much faster than using raw Raza. If I do love Raza, but again, it's more for technical people than for anyone. So I think that's quite a cool addition to that.
That's pretty cool. And I guess to add on to the voice interface, I think there's probably also a generational aspect to it. I can see some of my
Definitely.
nephews and nieces, they are 5, they don't know how to write properly, but they can still search things on YouTube, and they can do that because they can just use the voice commands.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
as they growing up, they're going to be more familiar and more comfortable using the voice interface, and it's just going to be natural to them.
Exactly. And I think there's also a bit of like, there's a generational aspect. I think there's a kind of aspect of the domain, because as a programmer, maybe you know how to do things without chatbots by just having an algorithm. But as a person outside of tech, you just want to ask a question and get an answer, and you don't necessarily want to kind of think about that complex algorithm that you build. So there's a lot of things that different people use technology in different ways. And as a programmer, maybe you want to have control and to build your own algorithm. But as anyone else, you just want to ask a question and get your answer. And it's quite funny talking to different people about it, because some people are very optimistic, some people are very skeptical, and it really can kind of reflect their background, their way of thinking. I think it's quite cool.
True. And so in that topic, what kind of impact does ChatGPT has on your field, and what do you see the future of your field being?
We're thinking actually about it very much at the moment, because I've seen a great post from someone in Conversational AI saying that there are basically two reactions to ChatGPT in the world of chatbot. Some company says it's not good enough, it's not reliable, you can't control it, so it's just not good. And some other companies say, all right, it's there, we got to use it because it's there and it's good. And I think we're pretty much working in the second paradigm. So we think that it's cool and it's really interesting to use it. And actually, we are having brainstorming sessions at the moment about how to implement it. And I think like it can do a lot of cool things. Like, for example, with Rasa, you pretty much have, let's say, fixed responses. So you can write a few variants of them. You can try to tell Rasa which ones to use depending on whether you're talking to a child or to, I don't know, elderly person, technical person. But it's quite an involved process doing that. So I'm not saying it's not doable, but it's not easy. And I think with other tools, it might also not be easy. ChatGPT gives you a chance to just write a prompt that would ask ChatGPT to rephrase your response in a way that would suit a particular audience, for example. And I think that's quite a big step forward. And I've seen one of the first projects I did with Rasa was about building a driving assistant, and it was supposed to be personalized. So if you are an introvert and you don't talk much, it would adjust. Or if you talk a lot, it would adjust. And it was really hard to do. And like, there's only binary logic that we could implement. Like, yeah, if a person has very long questions, ask in a longer way, or if it's very short, ask shorter. But it was a pain doing that. And I think ChatGPT opens a very big opportunity into having it much more fluent, personalized, much less formal. Because again, with Rasa, we usually write these terrible, bulky, completely unnatural answers saying that, sorry, this functionality is not implemented yet, blah, blah, blah. And that's terrible. We don't talk like that. You can ask ChatGPT to rephrase it in a more natural way, and it will do that. So I think it's a really big step forward in that sense. And so I think a problem with ChatGPT is that it's not always easy to rely on it. Like if you ask it to give you some facts, it might just make it up. Like I was asking some questions just about some legal systems, and it can make up things like what's the longest term of punishment for a certain crime. So that number will have been somewhere in that text, but it wasn't in the right place. And if you try to use it as a knowledge system, you risk a lot that, yeah, if you trust that, it might just screw you up. But I think as long as you come up with a good way to use it and that you can control, I think it really opens a lot of possibilities. And I think, I guess, funny to say, but obviously public awareness is a big thing. And I think a few years back, chatbots were rubbish and everybody knew that. So you would call your mobile provider, it would unleash a chatbot on you, and you would never get anything useful from it. And now there is ChatGPT, and it's showing that, okay, it's a system that has a lot of kind of knowledge, even if it's just, what's on the internet, what's in the public text. But you can ask common sense questions like, yeah, who is Einstein, or when was he born, and stuff like that, and it knows that. Or you can even sometimes ask more specific questions, and it still knows that, and it can answer correctly. And I think that really shows that, all right, compared to 10 years back, the field is so much more advanced. So I think that there will be more interest towards it. There will be a boom of conversational AI just because people understand that, okay, it's there now and it can do cool things. So let's do cool things with it.
Yeah, 100%. It's really exciting to think about what's going to happen over the next 10 years, looking back, because progress is exponential. So
Exactly.
It's going to be a fun journey ahead. Anna, we're kind of up with our time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. We'll definitely have you back.
Thank
because
you. It was a pleasure for me.
We still have a lot of questions, but we didn't manage to get through all of them. Just to wrap up, do you have anything you'd like to promote? Anything that you're working on that you'd like people to know about?
I think one thing that, again, I want to highlight is just don't be scared in your job search and try to do practical projects. So again, I love mentioning Omdana. I'm not paid by them. I just really love it. But anything that helps you build practical skills and also meet more people from the domain is good. And it's probably very scary now on the job market. There was another round of layoffs announced yesterday. I think it's impacting people a lot, even people who are trying to get into the domain or trying to change a job. It's really scary. But time was never easy. When I was looking for my first job, that would be 1.5 years or 1 in a year. So it's never easy, but we always get there. So just don't lose hope.
Never give
And
up.
I think it's very easy to lose hope now, but I really hope not to see people getting desperate. I always feel sad about it because I understand it so much. I've been there, but it all works out in the end.
It does. It's important to keep pushing and stay positive and ambitious. Brilliant. It was fantastic to have you on. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.